Thank you, Mr. President. I rise this evening, Mr. President, to add my voice in support of these bills, the Barbados Medicinal Cannabis Industry Bill, as well as the Sacramento Cannabis Bill. I want to start by going back, very similar to when the leader of government business started. He more or less went back to the history of cannabis use, certainly in the Western Hemisphere and elsewhere. We'll not go that far back. But I think to bring this whole discussion into its proper historical context, I should at least go back as far as the start of civilization right here in the Caribbean. Mr. President, the use of plants for medicinal reasons is a practice that goes back to the days of our ancestors when we were brought here from Africa as enslaved persons. In many cases, we were taken to plantations where there was no kind of health care provided. And Africans were forced to self-medicate. You see, what had happened was, when they brought us here, they were able to strip us of our language. They were able to strip us of our religion. Some cases, some may argue that they were able to strip us of our dignity. But one of the things that they could not take away from us was our memories, our knowledge of medicinal plants and the way they were used and applied. So, the use of plants for healing is nothing new to Barbados. It's nothing new to the Caribbean. And I spoke specifically of Africans, but in reality, those indentured servants, East Indians, Amerindians, they all brought some aspect of medicinal plant use into the Caribbean culture, into the Caribbean identity, into the Caribbean context. Over the years, Mr. President, the use of plants as medicine, it grew and knowledge was built on knowledge. And this would have continued maybe until the 1960s or so, with the advent of the Drug Service Act and, well, let me just put the Health Care Act, which was passed back in 1969. We saw the advent of a universal health system. You'd have seen a number of polyclinics being established in those days, and they just had free access to medication, so there was not as much a need for medicinal plants as existed before. So from 69 onward, you start to see a gradual decrease in the use of plants as a form of health care, or the use in medicinal plants. And there were other reasons that one may argue for the disappearance of this important aspect of our culture, our cultural heritage. There was a view that maybe some tablets were more effective or had greater efficacy, as a term that I think doctors prefer to use. There were issues pertaining to the dosage. I think I recall one of the honourable senators here speaking to someone who might have overdosed on, I think it was a tea or something that normally would be healthy and would be helpful, but if you abuse it or overdose on it, then it may have some adverse effects on you. And the mere fact the easy availability of Western medicine, free of cost, might have been one of the reasons too why persons would have moved away from medicinal plants. Now, cannabis in particular, this, as was identified by, as was stated by the leader of the government business, the use of this goes back to thousands of years. But it was really in the 1930s or so, well, the 1830s, sorry, 1838, specifically when the slave trade was abolished and the British were forced to look elsewhere for farm labor. Because what happened, obviously, after slaves had the opportunity to be free, a lot of them would have fled from the plantation in bigger territories like Jamaica, Trinidad, and Guyana, where there was space that persons could go out and form their own settlements, their own villages. They did so. In Barbados, of course, there was no place to go. So we were forced to go back on the plantation and work for a small wage. But in Jamaica, Guyana, Trinidad, you could not pay a person enough money to stay anywhere near a plantation. So the British turned to their giant colony in Asia, India, and they brought in these Indian indentured servants. And with those servants, those Indians, as was mentioned by Senator Walker, came the ganja, came cannabis, but ganja was the Hindi name for it. That's why we hear that name in places like Jamaica, who would have borrowed from the Hindi use of the Hindu use of they use it as a sacrament then within the Hindu religion. So, contrary to popular belief, ganja was introduced into the Caribbean by Indians and not necessarily by Rastas, which is interesting because today most people associate cannabis use with the Rastas and with the youngsters and so on and so forth, but do not associate it with Indians at all, especially in Barbados. I personally have never seen anyone from the any Hindu using it. I'm not saying that they do or they don't, but I've never seen it. I've never seen any association between the two. In 1960s, what occurred in Jamaica even though the Rastafarian religion would have been established back in the 1930s or so, in the 1960s is when you got mainstream a movement towards the use of ganja, mainly by young persons who, in their effort to reject and to shake off any aspect of colonialism, embrace cannabis, because it was an affront to colonialism. And that's perhaps why there's this link between the rebel movement, the rebel religion of Rastafarianism, that's how I term it back then, and cannabis use. And we saw that also in the 1970s, I think the year presented was 1975, where we saw Rastafarian take root in Barbados as well. Now today, 40 plus years later, this very same cannabis that was introduced into the region by indentured servants is now, according to the report of the Caricon Regional Commission on Marijuana 2018, is regarded by Rastas as a holy herb, a gift from God. And I heard a senator made light of that. Rastafarians, persons of the Rastafarian religion, Rastas. Right? And it said, and I read here, and I just want to quote, I am prepared to make this a document of the House. Cannabis is regarded by Rastas as a holy herb, a gift from God. It is their primary sacrament, and it's ritualized smoking during communal smoking sessions known as reasoning or grounding. It's paramount to their way of life. Smoking of marijuana or smoking of cannabis is paramount to the way of life of Rastafarians. Ganja is also viewed as the most natural and direct route to communion with God and to the Rastafarian brothers, and is used as an essential element in prayer and meditation. And this is not Senator Springer saying this. This is according to the report of the Caricon Regional Commission. This is according to the report of learned persons who have taken the time to go and do the research and to interview persons and do what is necessary to ensure that. So it's not my views. And they even cited Bible verses. They didn't identify which Bible verse, but they cited Bible verses to reinforce the fact that there's a direct link between cannabis and godliness. It's true. And there was a senator here earlier tonight citing Bible verses. Now, I would encourage him, as I said, to read Proverbs chapter 12, verse 18. He could probably read verse 19 as well. You should read those two verses and then chapters and verses that come in here, because and let that inform how he reacts and how he responds and how he speaks and how he presents to the Senate on a weekly basis. Because he needs to understand that this power in tongue and reckless. He should be in here. Yeah, he should be here. But move on, Mr. President. Now, Mr. President, I give a little background there about cannabis and its origins in the region and its genesis in the region. And I can say, even today in 2019, there exists no doubt in my mind that there's a negative social perception towards the use of cannabis in Barbados. There is. And I'm tempted to believe that it's linked to its association with the Rastafarian religion. And some people may associate it with crime and violence. And I took it upon myself to go and research exactly the perception based on a study that was done by Cadres back in 2003, which indicated that the majority of Barbadians, 59%, believed that this marijuana, as they call it, was harmful, and just about 36% of the population thought it was beneficial for one's health. People saw it as especially dangerous for young people, to add to what Senator Rogers would have said. Of course, that was in 2003, and a similar study was done some years later, just about 2 years ago, which shows that the view, this hardline view towards cannabis and its medicinal benefits has softened, and less persons believe that marijuana is now harmful. In fact, 52% of the population, based on a cadre study done in 2017, says that 52% persons believe that it should be decriminalized or legalized. So people are moving away from that old thinking. I'm going to speak to that negative social construct that's taken root in Barbadian society and Caribbean society, to get a sense of where it came from. Because when you think about it, linking negativity and Rastafarianism and all these things is a false concept. You don't see a lot of Rastas or Rastafarians in any kind of trouble. When I read in the court papers, I don't see a lot of Rastas there, charged with crime and so on and so forth. I mean, apart from, you see a lot of young people, but not necessarily a lot of Rasta people, but yet there's a negative perception of Rastafarianism because of a colonial view that I'm going to address shortly. I tried to find out what happened, why a plant that in the 1920s, early part of the 19th century, 20th century was sold in shops. You could go in place in Trinidad and buy as much cannabis as you want. You could, any part of Ghana, Jamaica, you couldn't go, you can buy it. It was sold in shops like any other plant until about the 1930s or so, 1937. And I did my research and I came across, because sometimes you have to look north, make no bones about it. There's a word, a term that I remember using as a student in university, term hegemonic discourse. And that, how I understood it, was that some countries' culture, their influence is so strong that they influence other people around them to do what they are doing. Just like Jamaican culture was so strong, the musical culture is so strong that they influence the entire Caribbean. They're losing their way now in terms of music. It's not as it's lost way to the African music that's coming over from Nigeria and these places, but their culture was so dominant in the region that we do what they did. We sport as they sport. We use their terms, even if we didn't understand what they were saying or what they meant in Jamaica. We use them here in the Caribbean. That is hegemonic discourse. That's a dominant culture. And mind you, North America has a dominant culture even in the Western Hemisphere, and it would have influenced in some way, shape, or form that negative perception that we have of cannabis here in the Caribbean. And when you look at it, and I think it was Senator Rogers who talked about it in the 1930s, when government official Harry and Slinger, when his war on drugs and his belief. That's why when I hear people say certain things, it bothers me about marijuana, cannabis not being safe, being dangerous for young people, being dangerous for women, being dangerous for children, and so on and so forth, because that is the exact same line that he took. He took the view that because it was associated with Mexicans and immigrants and blacks and athletes and musicians and so on and so forth, that it was bad, it had to be bad, because blacks were using it. And when white women use it, they were susceptible to black men. And that was a problem in the 1930s. Remember, this is 1930s America that we're talking about, you know. Think about 1930s America and 1930s Barbados. Remember, we had the riots in 1937, so you know things were not the best here in the 1930s. And the perception of us as a people was, Rastas were even worse, but they weren't even a thing yet. But as a black person, you were inherently bad as far as the colonials were concerned, and it was. So I was not surprised that part of the reason, or maybe the main reason why cannabis was banned in the States was because it was a drug that was used by non-whites, a drug that was used predominantly by blacks and persons in the music industry, because those racist, xenophobic views were rampant, were very commonplace in the 1930s, United States of America, all over. So, and there's no doubt in my mind that those views, and then there was something that was said. Don't let me move there too quickly. But I jot down a whole list of things here that Senator Franklin said, and I'm sorry that he's not here, but not being safe. And a lot of people are mad because he used marijuana. And funny enough, that was the same argument that was used by Ann Slinger to ban cannabis in the United States. Same argument. It sent people mad. In fact, if I recall, there was a case of a young Italian immigrant who had killed his entire family or something like that with an axe. And that was the case that he used to strengthen his argument to ban marijuana, introduce a marijuana tax in 1937 in the United States. It was that case. It's only years later people went back and studied the young man's family and discovered that the man was mentally ill. There were other issues at play. In fact, the year in front, his family was encouraged to have that man admitted into a mental institution, and they did nothing. And there was even no evidence to suggest that the man ever used marijuana at all. But these are the type of arguments, and you look for every case of violence, and where there was even the slightest link to marijuana use, he used that to build the case that marijuana was somehow responsible for mental illness. And somehow we have taken that racist, xenophobic, colonial view, perception of marijuana. We've continued to this entire day where we believe that marijuana, it was sending people mad, when in actual fact there's no evidence to support this notion. There's not enough evidence. And on evidence, let me speak to some of the things that Senator Franklin said when he did his presentation, that I took the trouble to jot down here. You understand? This racist ideology. My God, I gotta speak to it because people listen to him. He said that we have not had enough time to research this marijuana to know if it's safe. When in actual fact, Israel was researching marijuana from way back in I know for the 90s for sure, medical. But I'm hearing now 64. But I know they perfected it for decades. And when you look at conventional or Western medicine, where they go through the trials, the clinical trials, the whole process takes about how long? The research and development takes about what, 10 years? 1 decade? To determine if this medicine is safe? And we have a country that was researching marijuana for 40 plus years, some 20 plus years, but yet we have people coming here today in this honorable place and say that there's not enough research to prove that it's safe. Like, seriously? And that's not the only thing he said that I found to be upsetting. There was a number of other things. Then he said that we have to be careful. We have a nation of zombies. This exaggerated colonial nonsense. A nation of zombies. Because what? I mean, it's not like we're bringing cannabis into Barbados. I believe it's here already. And we don't have a nation of zombies right now. And then there's this view, and there's a real view that a lot of us should take the blame for, and it has something to do with language. Cannabis is seen as a drug and not as a medicine. And the term drug elicits a perception of something that's bad that can be abused as opposed to medicine. You see, a drug is not, if a drug, when you think about drug, you don't think about a prescription that a professional who's trained in his field, that he would have prescribed that to you. So you can conjure all kinds of negative perceptions of drug as opposed to medicine. Whereas you have medicines that people can go into the pharmacy next door there and buy that are just as harmful or even more harmful. I didn't need to call the names. You can buy anyway. But you can go anywhere in Barbados and buy these opioids and benzos and all these different things that young people can go and buy that are just as harmful or more so than marijuana. But we don't have there's no negative social construct, no negative perception about these drugs because a doctor can prescribe them because they're made in North America, because they're made in the West, so they're good. Even though they're bad, they're still good. We have to discard, we have to somehow change the narrative about marijuana. That's our biggest obstacle. To get people to understand that marijuana is just a plant. If it's abused, it can be harmful. If you abuse anything, it will be harmful. And that's the reality. If you abuse anything, it's harmful. But it has to do a lot with perception. That's why I think, as politicians, language and perception. There was a time I recall a young lady came to speak to us, and she spoke to us about race, and that race was a political construct. I didn't understand what she meant at the time. That race, being white or black, was determined on what country you were born in. If you're born in Barbados and you look like me, you're black. Simple. If you look like Senator Adams, maybe white. In some circles. You go to Latin America, I'm black and he's white. You go to South Africa, I'm black and he's colored. You go to America, I'm black and he's black as well. And that's the reality. It's a political construct determined by politicians. If you're black or white. And I found that so amazing. And the same thing applies to marijuana. It's up to the political class to change, to drive the narrative that says to the populace that this is not bad. This is not harmful. What we believe and what we have heard and what we know about marijuana and the perception that we carry about marijuana is rooted in a racist, xenophobic, colonial ideology that has no place in the 2019, 21st century Barbados. It just does not have any place in a modern Barbados. We need to dispel all these notions about marijuana and its use. And when we get past that, then we can look at building a marijuana, a cannabis industry, a medicinal cannabis industry. When we understand that there's nothing wrong with the plant. Which brings me to the vision of the bill. And I just want to look at the vision of the bill. I had listed some things here. Maybe it fell down here. It's still on there every time here. Oh, here it is. Thank you. The vision of the industry in terms of where we can go with this industry. Now, marijuana, I'm saying marijuana because that's a term that I'm so... a term that I use commonly, but I really haven't learned the origin of the word. I haven't learned that the word is rooted in racism and xenophobia. I haven't learned that the word was used invoke and elicit anti-immigrant perceptions and get people to think that marijuana is bad because it's linked to Mexicans. I really feel uncomfortable using that term. Should probably perhaps use cannabis or ganja, which has more pleasant etymology or origin. But as I said, this medical marijuana or medical cannabis is a multi-billion-dollar industry, multi-billion-dollar industry. And I think it's something that, as a country going forward, we should look, to look at in terms of generating revenue for our economy. And in doing so, empower our people with the necessary training, necessary skills, necessary tools to fully exploit this particular industry. And when they come in here, I speak for the small man. And I will want to see that the small man, the poor man, gets the benefit from this industry. And we don't have what happened here in this country so many years ago, where we see what I would refer to as agricultural gentrification, where the small farmer is eventually pushed out of the market by the big commercial farmer who has the capital and the technology, to build out the industry, and we forget about the small man. We don't want to see that happen. I would never want to see that happen in this country again. It happened during the sugar boom, the sugar industry. When that took off, all the other small holdings disappeared, and you had persons outside living in England buying land here and establishing large plantations. You don't want to see that. We're not going back to that. I would hate to see that happen. I would encourage the government to put measures in place to ensure that nothing like that ever happens in Barbados again. We have to ensure that the most vulnerable among us are taken care of. That's who we are placed in office to protect. So I support any move that would address that. Senator Walk, Franklin, he also made reference, now I'm on the topic, I know I addressed it earlier, but was out of line at the time, where he looked at the use of the spas, we call cannabis tourism or marijuana tourism, the benefits that could be accrued from that. I looked, when I was studying and researching for the tourism levy bill, for another bill, I discovered that one of the fastest growing aspects within the niches within tourism now is what you refer to as marijuana tourism, cannabis tourism. And these therapeutic facilities that we envisage in the bill, I suspect, is the direction that this country should go in to tap into that revenue. I just want to make the point that it has been recommended that smoking of the marijuana is not a desired or is not a recommended means of administering the cannabis. It's not. I'm speaking to an empty chair, but I just want to make it clear to the listening public that we're not encouraging any smoking. Smoking is not, at least not for medical. For Sacramento, that's something completely different, for completely different reasons. Persons have their religious freedoms, and how they choose to use their sacrament is entirely up to them. We've made the necessary arrangements that within their holy places of worship, they have access to the sacrament. Some may argue that it has not gone far enough, that particular aspect of the bill, but I believe it's a step in the right direction. Certainly it's a lot better than what they had before, where they had to hide and do it, even though I was told by the good Reverend today that even then, no, they weren't hiding. So as I wrap up, Mr. President, I just want to just make the point that this particular piece of legislation, or these two pieces of legislation, I think brings Barbados into the 21st century in terms of trends, in terms of human rights, freedom of religion. Persons are now in a position now to have access to what they refer to as their sacrament, with minus the harassment that they might have experienced in the past. We're now in the cusp of exploring an industry that may be of extreme benefit to the country as a whole, a new track for development in terms of our economy. We have the necessary land. We have a good cohort of educated persons, perhaps within this Caribbean space. We have the largest cohort of trained, educated persons. We have a number of institutions in place that are ready to train young persons, train young minds to fully exploit this industry, emerging industry. We also stand ready to embrace any type of technological transfer that we may benefit from. In other words, I see this as good legislation and good for this country. But as I said earlier, we have to work on dispelling this racist, colonial, xenophobic perception that anything that is black in origin, benefits the black person, comes from a place other than Europe, is bad. We have to dispel that. We have to work on reorienting the views of our people against marijuana. And one last thing. In response to Senator Rogers, I sat down here, I enjoyed your presentation. I was really impressed with your knowledge of marijuana, cannabis. I'm learning a lot of new things about you, sir. Your interest is wide, far-reaching. Very, very complex, Reverend, very complex personality. But I don't know if I share your fear. I'm sure there are regulations already in place to protect our young people. And as a government, we would do all in our power to protect our young people from what you suggest may very well happen. I think because there's no regulations in place, I think that's the reason why they have access to marijuana in the way that they do right now. When you legalize something, when you regulate something, you can put certain things in place. And you see it with alcohol. We're at a certain age, even though we know that for years, grandfathers and grandfathers would send their child to the shop to buy alcohol, but we know at a certain age, you shouldn't be selling a child alcohol. That's something's regulated. You get that happening. People will not sell a child or give a child something that they know the law says is not, they're not the right age to purchase. But with regulations, you get that kind of discipline. Without it, you get what we're seeing here now. I suspect to, with the change coming, the whole concept of cannabis use is going to change. The whole culture is going to, this bill is going to change the culture of Barbados. Mark my word. It's going to change the culture of Barbados over time. We're going to see some gradual changes in the way we perceive things in this country. As I said, I'm going to just, as I close, just want to say I support this bill 100%. I like the direction that is going in terms of changing this racist ideology. I like the potential in terms of what it can add to our economy when we fully embrace this new industry. So with these few words, Mr. President, I'm obliged.
Senator Frakes, the time has now come for you to address.
Mr. President, thank you. And I want to say good night to the chamber. And I hope that my short contribution is not a bedtime story. It's starting that way, I'm hearing. Is it that I am starting that way, or is the hour that I am starting at? But nonetheless, Mr. President, I will try to make a short contribution. And what I want to say is I've heard a lot of the discussion around particularly medicinal cannabis bill. I haven't heard that much debate around the sacramental cannabis bill. But nonetheless, and I also take into consideration what Senator Rogers educated us on in terms of the differentiation between what gives persons the high in cannabis versus the medicinal aspects in terms of the CDB versus the THC and whatnot. And what I will also say is, despite having that distinction on the scientific or the cellular level of the plant, in the physical plane, which is what you see, the material plane, just by looking at it, sir, it is hard to differentiate medicinal cannabis from sacramental cannabis because physically it is a plant and it is cannabis, despite its different properties at the cellular level. Sir, and I say that because garlic has medicinal properties, turmeric has medicinal properties, but we don't walk around talking about medicinal garlic or medicinal turmeric. Sir, cannabis, by and large, as I said, is a plant, and it has various uses. And when you start to try to compartmentalize the uses and try to legalize the uses, you start to run into the problems that we seem to be having in the discussions at the moment, and even in the ushering in so quickly of the sacramental use bill along with the medicinal cannabis bill. And when you start to try to legalize these different uses, it does raise some concerns, particularly when you try to legalize or try to regulate religious uses, Mr. President. And I want to say that the Rastafari community has sought for many years to educate the public about the benefits of cannabis. And much of the negative perceptions around Rastafari and the community has been associated with the stigma associated with cannabis. And a lot of times when I ask persons, you know, where does your perception come from? Or have you spoken to somebody in the community? There's very little knowledge in terms of what happens in the community, what the community stands for, their teachings and their philosophies. And I find it interesting that persons sometimes have such a strong position on something that they know very little on. Sir, it would be remiss of me, and I know the hour is late, but I wanted to add to the contribution because given I'm the only person in here wearing dreadlocks, I thought I should say something. That's fine. Sir, there's some teachings and philosophies of the Rastafari community that I can appreciate. These are actually my second set of dreads. So I did cut my first set. So I don't subscribe solely and fully to the religion. And in my research and my experience in the community, I found a set of individuals who, despite a lot of the colonial constructs, sought to find black consciousness in a deity. And I found that admirable in a time where that was completely unheard of. Your blackness could not be associated with anything godly. And I said to myself, if those are the types of persons who are seeking that type of knowledge for themselves, within themselves, there must be some merit to the way of life that they have. Sir, what I found in the community was persons who live with a rhythm with nature. They align themselves to the natural cycles of the world, who they respect creation, and who believe in a certain liberty. There's a strong commitment to promotion of life, Mr. President. And even in something as subtle as words that they use, they're very careful with. And we've heard it today that the power is in the tongue. Word sound is powerful. And when you look at the type of words that they use, you would never hear a Rastafari say, "I understand." He would say he overstands, and even further, when you speak, they understand what you're saying. I know we have an honorary Jamaican in the chamber. So they understand that when you talk, they focus on a lot of positivity, as I'm hearing on the asides. And it is so vital because a lot of the times we're not even conscious of the things that we say and how we say it. And I remember hearing at one point somewhere in my readings or hearing a conversation that when you're spelling, you're casting spells. When you are spelling, you're casting spells, and you have to be mindful of the words that you use in your day-to-day living. And all of these things come into play when you start to look into or research the Rastafari community. And in the experience that I had, what I found was a group of individuals who use the cannabis as a plant and for sacramental purposes in their day-to-day living. And what I also found very interesting is that the perversion that the rest of society had towards the plant, they did not have. The obsession and the exotic nature by which the rest of society had towards cannabis, they did not have. They used it alongside all other herbs to be used in its natural order and discipline. And for me, what we're trying to do today is remindful of something I read quite recently where it said, political power is the ability to determine what is right, what is wrong, by whom, and to what degree. I thought that was very fitting of these two bills that we have before the chamber today, Mr. President. And it's quite clear in Part 5 of the medicinal cannabis bill under general penalties, and my colleague spoke to it earlier, where the fine is actually $100,000, whereas in Clause 8 and 9 of the Sacramento bill, the fine for contravention is $10,000. So again, it is what is right, what is wrong, by whom, and to what degree. So now we have a situation that Western scientists and capitalists have found an opportunity. The scientists have said what the Rastafarians have been saying for a number of years. There are benefits to cannabis, and the capitalists have seen a new avenue for making money and a high return on investment. But we have to do it within these parameters, these legal parameters, which we are going to have some difficulty combating the cultural position that we usually find ourselves on when we talk about cannabis. And where we also find ourselves is similar to where we were in the 1930s as it relates to the legalization. It was about economics at the time, and today it continues to be about economics. As Senator Adams noted, we're somewhat at a reset in terms of where we need to go in terms of growth, and I agree. And we have to find areas where we can look for new injections of economic activity. The figures that I found for the legal cannabis market in another 5 to 6 years is around $66 to $7 billion globally. And as was earlier mentioned, Israel is at the forefront of research and development. But when you dig a bit deeper into Israel's case, Israel has a cultural advantage. They are the leading exporters of clinical data for cannabis, but that is on the bedrock of a cultural practice that they have called kibbutz, K-I-B-B-U-T-Z. And that is a system whereby you have farming by collective and joint ownership. And they can easily implement precision agriculture in their society in order for them to have the plants that they need to have to do the R&D. When you take that type of context to why they're good at what they do in terms of R&D on cannabis, you have to take in the cultural aspects of the country. And my question then becomes, if we're moving in the medicinal cannabis industry, do we have the culture to support such an industry? We have a number of problems plaguing our agricultural sector, such as poor soil quality. Some would argue, okay, well, we moved to hydroponics in terms of production, and that also comes with its problems in terms of financial constraints. I can tell you even the pumps and the filters for hydroponics are quite expensive. We also have the issue of scarce water availability. Predial larceny is and continues to be a major hindrance in agricultural production in Barbados. It's also a disincentive. A lot of people tell you they're not going to get into agriculture because of predial larceny. And I quickly looked up the bill in the act, sorry, the Predial Larceny Prevention Act, Section 11, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm seeing a fine of only maximum of $5,000. So you have people pouring sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars into agriculture. Somebody comes and reaps the benefits, and they're only faced with a maximum fine of $5,000. And that's something, if we're talking about cultivation and harvesting and the like, we really have to address that fine as it relates to predial larceny. And the list goes on and on as it relates to the problems in the agricultural sector. But sir, what I want to say is something that Senator Springer also brought up, is this divide that could occur in terms of foreign ownership and local ownership. And the fact that we could have a situation where foreign ownership actually becomes dominant in this space, because you have locals who do not have the resources or the capabilities to compete with the foreign owners in the medicinal cannabis industry. And if we aren't careful that we have that transfer of knowledge and technology, then we already put our local owners, or those who want to get into the industry, at a disadvantage. And sir, we are seeing that in some of the other islands, Jamaica in particular. Some of their small farmers are actually, quite upset about being cut out of legitimate business as it relates to the cannabis industry there, because a lot of the license fees they cannot afford. So even by the fee that you're charged, you can't afford it. And that is not even to get into the issues of land ownership, land leasing, and capital expenditure. So I'm really hoping that there are mechanisms in place that we can protect those who actually want to get into the industry, and they're able to compete and do so legitimately. And sir, I also just want to touch quickly on the economics of all of this and ask a few questions. Senator Adams said a phrase that I want to use now. He said, you got to put some numbers to it. And I think in this case, because of how sensitive an issue it is it would be prudent for the government, even if it's preliminary, to start to put some numbers to this. I don't know if in the inner workings or the inner meetings they do have some numbers, and I look forward to hearing if they do. But the argument around the economic growth that it could provide for the country, I think in terms of what type of contribution should we expect from the introduction of an industry such as this? You know, in another 3 to 5 years, are we expecting a 1% in contribution to GDP, 2%? And that's $100 million, $200 million. What is the level of employment anticipated from the introduction of the industry? And who are you going to focus in terms of those employment numbers? Because we have a 30% unemployment rate among our youth. Are you going to target the youth to try to get into the industry to kind of combat the unemployment as it relates to that demographic? And also couple that with the conversation around how do we get the technical skills that are needed for the economic activity? A lot of the times we implement things on the economic side, and then the labor market does not have the skills required for the economic activity. So what type of programs are we rolling out at, let's say, the Barbados Vocational Training Board, the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute of Technology? Those are the types of conversations I would have anticipated or expected from the government when they brought this bill in. And a lot of it I did not hear in the other place or here today. Also, sir, in terms of the dedication of land towards this industry, I think if we're talking about food security and food sovereignty, you know, how much allocation of land are we going to put, or the optimization of land even, as it relates to the introduction of the industry? Taking into account, as I said, things like the soil type, what are the transportation links like in terms of the security of moving around the plant across the island, and the access to water. A lot of the times in our more rural areas, there is a serious problem as it relates to the access and the availability of water on the island. Or even in terms of the geographical elevation, Mr. President, the plant actually has an optimal temperature by which it grows at, and we have to figure out all of these things, or the private persons coming into the island, but I think it has to be government to understand what is the parameters by which the introduction of the industry is going to happen. Sir, the other question I would also pose is, you know, what part of the value chain are we intending to focus on? I know the bill covers cultivation, harvesting, and everything else along the value chain, but I am not hearing specifically what is it that we are focusing on, because we cannot be all and the end all, because we don't have the resources to do so. Sir, in saying that, we also have an issue in terms of manufacturing. So if we are going to go into final product, manufacturing final products such as the tinctures and the patches and everything else, is the importation cost of the inputs to make the final products worth even setting up a manufacturing sector that, or an agro-processing center that facilitates the exportation of the final products, or even sale on the local market? And also, Mr. President, I haven't heard much of the discussion either on, as Senator Rogers raised, on hemp. As the world moves to more eco-friendly products, hemp is going to be a very strong, viable alternative to petrol-based plastics and other materials that are harmful to the environment, and that could also be a viable, option for alternative products. Right now, globally, hemp is used in over 25,000 products. So if you're looking for a market, it may actually be the hemp market and not necessarily the medicinal cannabis. Sir, the other thing I questioned is the bill also, the medicinal cannabis bill also allows for the licensing for importation. How do we ensure that we export more than we import to ensure that there's a positive net effect on the balance of payments? Because if you're allowing the importation of products and as well as exporting it, who's to say we don't import a lot more than we export? And further, Mr. President, if you are not a farmer and you're an average Barbadian with $5,000, and Senator Adams started to to allude to some of the financial difficulties and constraints that we would probably face going forward for the industry. But if you're an average Barbadian and you have about $5,000, how do you participate in the industry? How do you buy equity? And what mechanisms are going to be put in place in order for persons to participate in the industry aside from farming? So essentially, all of those questions are to sum up or to ask the question, what is the economic feasibility? What is the economic feasibility of all of this? And lastly, I want to also ask the question is, and this is from a very personal and close to my heart, because I believe in compassion. There has been a lot of hurt caused by the incarceration of individuals, the harassment of individuals, the persecution to the Rastafarian community. And I want to put on the table, is there room for government to set aside part of the taxes that will be gained from this industry as reparations to the Rastafarian community, whether it be in scholarships, community development, some type of mechanism where we really say to those that have been ostracized to a very serious extent, because we're not going to make money from this if we do it properly. The same very thing that we incarcerated people for, we put their livelihoods at stake. Can there be some mechanism put in place that part of the proceeds of the taxation from this industry go towards the Rastafarian community for their upliftment and development in the future? Because they were right once in the past and we didn't listen. Imagine if we actually listened then, would we be at the forefront like Israel? Even now, as we move further into the 21st century and we start to understand the issues with the diet and everything else, veganism has become very popular. No, veganism has become very popular across the world for whatever reason, but various reasons. The same Rastafari community has said to us for years, ITIL is vital. So, sir, I just ask that we start listening to our own more closely. we start listening to our own more closely and try to see if there are opportunities that we have right on our doorstep, but we refuse to listen to those who we may not think have the knowledge or the education, but sometimes they are a lot more wise than we perceive them to be, Mr. President. And as I said, I don't want to read a bedtime story. So, sir, with those remarks, I am obliged to you.
Good night, Mr. President. Good night, Mr. Colleague. Oh, I'm that tired. Good night, colleagues. At this time, it most definitely will be a bedtime story, 9:45. Right, so a few things that we grew up hearing that we shouldn't talk about when we're in polite company are money, politics, and religion. And if you live in Barbados, you would add any discussion surrounding cannabis to that list in recent months. Just to kind of sort through some of the questions and some of the rhetoric that were thrown out in the public sphere or even discussed in here, to be clear, this legislation, the Medicinal Cannabis Industry Bill, in no way seeks to legalize cannabis for anything other than for medicinal use. It seeks to establish a clear national licensing scheme where there will be a closed loop from seed to sale for the cultivation, processing, and manufacturing and export of products derived from cannabis. This bill also seeks to create a framework where credentialed medical practitioners recognized under the laws of Barbados would be able to prescribe therapeutic products derived from cannabis for their patients. At the same time, it also seeks to allow formally credentialed pharmacists recognized by the laws of Barbados to dispense cannabis-based products, and also seeks to create a framework where individuals who have a medical indication for the use of cannabis-based products may now do so legally. The waters have been muddied in the public sphere and to some extent through some earlier presentations, and I hope that as a member of the Joint Select Committee, I would be able to offer a bit more clarity. The Joint Select Committee was convened, chaired by the Minister of Agriculture. Deputy Chair was the Honourable Minister of Health, and we had the privilege of meeting on 5 occasions in order to ensure that the bill that was seen back in August could become the best possible version of itself, based on input from members of the other place, of members of the independent side, the opposition side that sit in this House, as well as 2 members from the government side. And the beautiful thing about it was, this was our 4th Joint Select Committee as a government so far. It's a beautiful process. I think it's something that is good for democracy in terms of the engagement that we saw. Senator Franklin also sat on that committee, as hard as it might be, be to believe based on his presentation today. But as he made reference to, the first day that we showed up at LESC, because we met off-site, which was actually, I believe, the first time that members of the houses had met off-site, there was a line going down the stairs. Just word of the nature of the subject drew a massive crowd. And whatever he mentioned was ironed out, and we were able to hear from a wide range of members of civil society and different groups, including not people that were handpicked or people we wanted to hear from, but key stakeholders that should, we believe, have valuable input and be able to help us to shape the legislation in order to make it the best version of itself. We accepted contributions from general members of the public who came, spoke freely, some of them on more than one occasion, but in addition to that, we heard from the Bankers Association, the Pentecostal Association of the West Indies, the National Council for Substance Abuse, the Barbados Association of Medical Practitioners, the Barbados Pharmacy Council, the African Heritage Foundation, and that is not an exhaustive list. I don't want to send everybody to sleep. But just so you have an idea, 5 meetings of a committee, hearing from everybody we had, at one point it was a lady who used to work for Merck. She worked at a pharmaceutical corporation in the US, and she's a Barbadian, and she gave a very, very compelling presentation. Rasimba, we had determined that the presentation should be something like 15 minutes or a half hour. Rasimba, the first day, spoke for close to 3 hours. And it was actually during the course of his presentation, he made the point, how can you call my sacrament recreation? So that is why the sacramental bill was birthed, in a sense, out of the Joint Select Committee that we had. It was a very, very compelling case because as a follow-on from that, the Attorney General made it clear that in the OECS courts, Justice Ventos, I believe his name is, that's right, had made a ruling on a case relating to the use of sacraments, so he had established that precedent had already been established. And further to that, the Constitution protects the religious freedoms of Barbadian citizens. So it is no surprise to me that the decision has been made to see this as a cognate debate, although there are 2 very, very distinct things that we are dealing with. I am choosing to focus on the medicinal cannabis side of it because I'm a doctor and because I sat on the committee. So it has already been established that for about 5 millennia, the plant, and in all of its forms, has been used for its healing properties. William Osler, the father of modern medicine in the mid-1800s, actually made a reference. He wrote the first book of internal medicine. He founded Johns Hopkins Hospital, and he wrote that cannabis, by his estimation, was the most satisfactory treatment for migraine headaches. And this was in 1850, 1860. Further to that, you could find cannabis at dispensaries all over the United States, all over Europe and the United Kingdom. And more likely than not, as Senator Dr. Springer had alluded to, it had been used by our own indigenous people and by the African people who were enslaved and brought here, because you could almost see that from the east to the west, clear value had been seen in terms of the healing benefits. The prohibition of the plant, Senator Dr. Springer has already spoken to, but what happened in that time was that there was a missed opportunity in terms of our ability to build on the knowledge that others had already gleaned. The kind of almost anecdotal evidence that they had, we hadn't been able to really pursue it further because of a full-fledged prohibition. Many people already know that in the United States, it's classified as a Schedule I drug, which, according to them, has a high abuse potential and has no known medical benefit. But yet Reverend Rogers could identify patent 66035507, which they had from 2003. It just expired in April, but basically a patent for a cannabinoid where there are antioxidant benefits for the nervous system. So there was a level of hypocrisy at the same time saying, okay, we're going to ban this federally, but on the low, we're investigating it because there's something there, but at the same time, we're telling you there's nothing to it. Yep, it's fascinating. But further to the fact that there has been a relative dearth of research, there's still a growing body of evidence that is very, very compelling and is impossible to ignore. In the same United States, the Federal Drug Administration has approved a number of cannabinoids for various purposes. Dronabinol and nabilone for chemotherapy-induced nausea and vomiting. Epidiolex, that is a purified plant extract from a particular strain called Charlotte's Web, which has been shown to have benefits for something called Dravet syndrome and another syndrome called Lennox-Gastaut, where you get intractable seizures that don't respond to traditional medication, kids. Sativex, recently approved in the United Kingdom for the spasticity associated with multiple sclerosis. And pioneers right here in the region, Jamaica, 2 approved drugs on their formulary, Canasol and Asmasol, for the treatment of glaucoma and the treatment of asthma. So for someone who sat on the committee, an honorable member who sat on the committee, to suggest that it's all anecdotal and he had to look for things on YouTube. We had professional bodies come before us and present to us. It was just hard to believe, but I won't dwell on that. There are clear benefits to it. And further, I wanted to speak to the safety profile of cannabis for medicinal use. Senator Rogers, God bless him, he has a degree in chemistry, he indicated, so he had really gotten into the nitty-gritty in terms of the genus, the species, THC, CBD, and so on. But one thing that kind of stood out in his presentation that I believe needed to be addressed was that it sounded to me, I could be wrong, as if he was suggesting that CBD is the only cannabinoid that has healing properties. The truth is, the tetrahydrocannabinol, which has the psychoactive properties, also has therapeutic benefits related to appetite stimulation, particularly for use in cancer patients and for patients with HIV wasting syndrome, for patients with PTSD, glaucoma, that's right, Alzheimer's. So we can't throw out the THC. What we need to do is take them both together and kind of use this as an opportunity for indigenous research. Do what Jamaica did years ago. Jamaica has been developing drugs, eye drops, asthma treatment. We should see this as an opportunity. Further, I wanted to speak to the safety profile in a little more depth because we heard about basically an impending zombie apocalypse should this bill pass. I want it to be clear. Every therapeutic product that is out there has therapeutic benefits, but then there's also a risk of toxicity, and in some cases, lethal potential. When we talk scientifically about the safety of a drug, there are two indices that you have to be aware of, something called the LD50 or lethal dose 50. Basically, how much of the drug would it take to kill 50% of people using it, and something called the therapeutic index. Cannabis has a better safety profile than many of the things that you have in your bathroom cupboard. And I wanted to spend a little time talking about some of these things. So we hear a lot about the opioid crisis and so on. The opioid crisis accounted for 28,000 deaths in the United States last year. People who are just taking stuff recommended by their doctors, legally available for chronic pain, for whatever the case is, they have a medical indication to use this thing, and this thing is killing them. We heard about the risk of addiction. One of the things I wanted to say, this gateway theory has been debunked. The other thing I wanted to address was drug dependency. Drug dependency speaks to, let's say you start to use the drug, you want to stop, there's a likelihood that you won't be able to stop. The risk of that happening with cannabis is 9%. The risk of that happening with a lot of these legal opiates is around 35%. So the first thing, the risk of dependency is actually much lower than it is for drugs that are already readily available. A lot of people don't know this, but the chemical structure of heroin is actually 2 morphine molecules fused together. That is what heroin is, 2 morphines fused together. Just so everybody gets in their mind some of the stuff that's legally available right now. With regards to the opioid crisis, what also has been found is that in states where cannabis has been made available for medicinal purposes, they're finding a decline in their opioid-related deaths and overdoses. Do you know how many people have died from cannabis? 0. None. Nada. Further to that, there are drugs that are available without the need for a prescription. Over-the-counter medications, no prescription, walk into a pharmacy and buy it. Let's talk about cough syrup. Dextromethorphan.
That's right.
There's something called robo-tripping or skittling, where you can mix, I probably shouldn't put this out there next time somebody tries it.
All our children know.
But basically what's happening, you get people combining cough syrup with either an energy drink, soda, or caffeinated beverage
Correct.
to get a high. And a study coming out of the US revealed that up to 3 million people between the ages of 12 and 26 in 1 year, 3 million had admitted to skittling, or what they call robo. This is a play on the term of the name of the cough syrup, robo. I won't say it. Another one, an anti-diarrhea called loperamide. it is actually an opiate, but it's designed not to cross the blood-brain, something called the blood-brain barrier, so you tend not to get the neurological effects unless you use a ton of it. But it's relatively available on the shelf. You could buy 5 bottles. These are things that are not regulated. Let's talk about Panadols, aspirin. There was a study called the Aspirin trial. My medical colleagues might know about it, where incidentally, they found an increase in all-cause mortality for otherwise healthy elderly individuals who were using aspirin. Literally, the risk of death was increased compared to placebo. So you were better off taking nothing than using an aspirin if you did not have an indication for using aspirin. These are real clinical trials. I'm talking New England Journal of Medicine, Lancet. They're a Google search away. So when people tell me they're looking at YouTube and anecdotes, I don't know. And one last point I wanted to make. The most commonly accessed psychoactive substance worldwide is not cannabis. It's caffeine. Caffeine.
Don't trouble me though.
We won't get into alcohol and tobacco and all of the other things. But basically wanted to show you that the science shows us that the safety profile of cannabis is actually much better than a lot of the things that we are readily accessing already, some of them without prescription. And I wanted to hammer that point home in light of the zombie apocalypse reference. Why I also believe that this is important is that we got a submission from the National Council for the Disabled, and it really brought it home. And you made a reference to compassion that I think is so important, because so many times we're hearing the evidence isn't there, the evidence isn't there. But we have to be guided not just by science, but by the compassion. They made a case for their constituents, where they're explaining they have patients with intractable seizures and spasms, people who have crippling pain. The reference was made to something called medical refugees, forced to pack up and go to Canada and other places to get help. If they wanted to get it here, the bureaucracy of the past would have required them to get something called an import license. You're suffering with chronic pain or you're dying from terminal cancer, the time that will pass while that requisition sits on somebody's desk, Lord help you. So to see their letter almost enthusiastically welcoming this legislation.
People talking about people dark, people in the shadows.
So one of the things I also wanted to address was that there seems to be, like I said, a muddying of the waters where people are concerned that my honorable colleague who sat on the committee, representative from the opposition, had made reference to the fact that if you see a plant growing next to the road and you pull it up and you know what in it. If you read the bill, what is very, very clear, this entire structure is incredibly regulated. The same pharmacists recognized by the Pharmacy Act are the only people legally allowed to dispense. So this is not going to be the kind of situation where it's a free-for-all or you're planting plants in your yard. If you want to plant, you apply for a cultivator license. And this is not a small piece of land. Multiple acres in cultivation. And the regulations that will follow will stipulate certain things, because anybody who knows anything about growing cannabis on an industrial scale will know that it's grown in greenhouses. To avoid things like cross-pollination, you need temperature controls. All of these things are going to be put in place. The bill speaks to the fact that the Cannabis Authority will have to prescribe things, including particular details relating to the security of the facilities where the cannabis is grown. Each plant will have a tracer. So this is not the kind of thing, as my colleague said, that you can pick up next to the road and you don't know what's in it. Until our industry gets to the point where we can meet our own supply, there will be a need for importation. The Barbados National Formulary already has on 5 cannabinoids available for use by the local population. I think that was a move that was actually made since we came to power. So I don't anticipate large-scale importation, but just enough to meet the needs of the local population. And obviously this will be something that will be driven by our local pharmacist community and local medical community. I will not be lengthy because it's after 10. I'm going to close up shortly. But just a final point, because I recall when we were in the committee stage, I listened to Brass Tacks, a particular radio program, periodically, to hear get a pulse of what people are saying, what people are thinking. And I kept hearing a constant refrain. They ain't growing the food, why are they growing marijuana? But I want the House and the public to know that the Minister of Agriculture and the Ministry of Agriculture have made a significant push. I find sometimes we're not really great, as much as we claim to be better at communication than the previous administration. Sometimes we're not good at selling some of our wins. Because when I was made to understand what the Ministry of Agriculture has done in 18 months, it blew my mind. One of the things that many people might have heard of was something called the FEED program, which launched back in May, a program that's seeking to train 2,000 farmers, not just in crop cultivation, but animal husbandry, greenhouse construction, all of those things. And on top of that, participants in the FEED program are being given access to land, a minimum of 3 acres of land. I was made to understand that in 2018, Barbados did not export any Sea Island cotton at all, 0. That is what it had come to in the preceding decade. We currently have 350 acres of Sea Island cotton under cultivation, and if anybody doesn't understand the value of Sea Island cotton, it's the most valuable cotton on earth. A Sea Island cotton shirt will set you back about $500. Further to that, there's an effort to develop what's called a value chain, where we're no longer just producing it, but producing the end product. So the weaving and those things are areas that the ministry is actively looking into. As far as the sugar crop goes, the sugar cultivation goes, obviously we have a long history. We know that the crop hasn't been performing like it was, but that's another area where they're looking at a value chain. Agroforestry is another area. They're looking to increase the number of heads of black belly sheep to 1 million heads. That's right. And you had made a reference to the lack of water in certain areas and the impact on farmers. Currently, the ministry is engaged with the Caribbean Development Bank in an area called Spring Hall. Yeah, where they're doing something called water harvesting. So there are a number of different projects going. They're actually looking at modernizing the perennial larceny legislation. That's something that the ministries, they have already had consultations with farmers on. So a number of changes are coming. It's 10 past 10. I wasn't planning a sleepover, so Mr. President, I am obliged.
Concluded address, I recognize Senator Dr. Mills.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise at this late hour when nobody's listening and everybody's sleeping. But I rose principally because I sat as a member of the Joint Select Committee, and I was rather disturbed to hear Senator Franklin's comments today when everything he said did not exist in the report. And that's all I need to say on that matter.
Is it Larry?
That I have just said what I had to say on it.
You must not have break.
Everything that he denied exists in the report. Mr. President, the Joint Select Committee heard from many persons and there were extensive discussions. And I think one of the most impressive presentations was done by Dr. Blenman. And Dr. Blenman was a person who was a researcher. Her name is Dr. Roseanne Blenman. And she made 3 principal points, and I want to read for this Honourable Chamber the 3 points that she made. One was the value of the big data. The second one, the devil is in the details. And thirdly, she was concerned that medicinal cannabis might be our new sugarcane. In the sense, and I will speak on the new sugarcane issue because she felt that we might grow medicinal cannabis, and as has been stated, there are lots of categories of licenses, but unless you have the money to invest in the end product where the money really rests, you may well be entering into the zone of where sugarcane took us, where we work hard in the fields, produce brown sugar and molasses, sold it, and then other persons made the money. And it's quite obvious, based on the requirements and the regulations to come for this bill, that the average person, and they say average person on purpose, will not be able to compete in this marketplace. The level of security that is required will be modern and technologically based and expensive. So I hope that while we are selling this as a big thing for Barbados as a country, and it can be, for the individual, it might not be. Now, part of the bill speaks to the possibility of 30%, well, all of the investment has to have 30% local ownership. But local ownership doesn't necessarily mean Barbadian, because there's a part of, I think it's in the Immigration Act, where you can get immigrant status on the basis of your ability to invest. And that might well influence who owns the bigger parts of it. Overall, there is the possibility that Barbadians might well be able to bring cash together, since the banks at this stage are not yet supporting how we deal with the money to be made or the money to be borrowed to invest. Now, one of my colleagues in the Senate assured us that 9% of people being affected by marijuana is not a lot. Mr. President, I have had personal experience from seeing what happens in families where young males have been, and young black males under a certain age, have been severely affected. And for every one person that it happens to, that's 100% for that family. And therefore, we must not pretend that it doesn't happen. And while I agree with Senator Dr. Haynes that there will be no zombie apocalypse, we should listen to the psychiatrists and their cautions, because they are the people who treat the patients, the young patients who have the crises. Mr. President, it would be remiss of me if, when we discuss an agricultural bill, if I do not mention pork. Pork. Mr. President, we have spent a lot of time and space to talk about something in the future and develop the necessary legislation. However, while we were doing this, our pork industry was dying. And it wasn't dying because there was some disease outbreak. It was dying because we killed it. And I would just like to appeal to all those who can help to fix it. And I just want to say something about a supply chain. Mr. President, I met 3 young men, well, young men, yes, who had second jobs. And the second job was raising pigs. And they all raised piglets. They all had breeding sows, and they supplied piglets. And they sold the piglets on to someone who grew them for 3 months, and that person sold them on then to someone else who brought them to market. And then it was the butchers. So one piglet passed through 4 families. So you will notice now that if you drive through the countryside, particularly on Saturdays when people tend to clean the pig pens early in the mornings, you don't smell it because there aren't many pigs anymore. Because pork is not competitive. So we need to fix it. But the value, Mr. President, in that matter is not only the numbers of pigs. If we allow our unique genetics to die off or to be killed off, we have to start again to build back 60 to 80 years of genetic material. So despite those who wish to ban sows having their opinions, we need to look after the interests of the people who depend on the pigs. And there are very few people in this chamber, Mr. President, whose grandmother or grandfather did not have a pig or 2. And that pig would have paid for school fees in the days when we did not have free secondary education. Mr. President, I am not going to make many comments about the other bill before us. Suffice it to say that the definitions worry me in that I listened to Senator Rogers' interpretation and suggestions about whether we could have one plant versus another for sacrament. I don't wish to enter in discussion on that matter. But I believe that both bills and the conditions for both require tremendous security. And we cannot, at this stage, stop people from stealing other people's potatoes or yams or cassava. How will we stop people stealing marijuana? We have been unable to stop petty larceny of food crops with a far lower value per pound. I would like to hear where will we have the infrastructure, the manpower to stop and prevent the petty larceny that might occur when these crops are grown. Mr. President, I'm obliged to you.
Senator Walcott.
Thank you, Mr. President, and I rise to briefly speak on and wrapping up on this cognate debate. I must, of course, speak to the rather erudite presentations we have had from some members of the Honourable Chamber. I regret, however, we've had one blur on the evening's proceedings. Unfortunately, the blur apparently has seemingly disappeared and is not with us at this time. I don't know if it has anything to do with the fact that we are approaching midnight. But all in all, it has been a very interesting and very informative and indeed very educational debate on these 2 bills this evening. And because of the hour of the night, I just want to simply beg that these bills be read a second time. This bill be read a second time, sorry.
We do one at a time. The question is that the Medicinal Cannabis Industry Bill 2019 be read a second time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do not leave the chair
that I do not.
and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do not leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of the medicinal cannabis industry bill in committee. We are now in committee.
Yeah.
These zombies is going up, bitch, I get it.
Senators and committee.
Part 1, clauses 1 and 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that part 1, clauses 1 and 2 stand part.
The question is that part 1, clause 1, stand apart.
1 and 2.
1 and 2 stand apart. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Part 2, clauses 3 to 24.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that part 2, clauses 3 to 24 stand part.
The question is that part 2, clauses 3 to 24 stand apart. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Honorable senators against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Part 3, clauses 25 to 29.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that part 3, clauses 25 to 29 stand part.
The question is that part 3, clause 25 to 29 stand apart. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 4, clauses 30 to 37.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that part 4, clauses 30 to 37 stand part.
The question is that part 4, clauses 30 to 37 stand apart. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 5, clauses 38 to 41.
Chairman, I beg to move that part 5, clauses 38 to 41 stand part.
The question is that part 5, clauses 38 to 41 stand apart. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Part 6, clause 42.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that part 6, clause 42 stand part.
The question is that clause 6,
Part 6.
clause,
Part 6, clause
part 6, clause 42 stands apart. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Part 7, clauses 43 to 46.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that part 7, clauses 43 to 46 stand part.
The question is that part 7, clauses 43 to 46 stand apart. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
First schedule.
Chairman, I beg to move that the first schedule be a schedule to the bill. Be the first schedule to the bill, sorry.
The question is that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Second schedule.
Chairman, I beg to move that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
The question is that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Third schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the third schedule be the third schedule to the bill.
The question is that the third schedule be the third schedule to the bill. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Fourth schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the fourth schedule be the fourth schedule to the bill.
The question is that the fourth schedule be the fourth schedule to the bill. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Honourable Senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Honourable Senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the Medicinal Cannabis Industry Bill 2019 be now read a third time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Medicinal Cannabis Industry Act 2019.
The question is that the bill under consideration do now pass and be so cited. That is as the Medicinal Cannabis Industry Act 2019. All members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. And the bill has now been passed as the Act, the Medicinal Cannabis Industry Act 2019.
Order number 5, sir. In the name of the Honorable Leader of the Senate, the second reading of the Sacramento Cannabis Bill 2019.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
The question is that the Sacramento Cannabis Bill 2019 be now read a second time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no, and we think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do not leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further
The
consideration
question
of this
is
bill.
that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of this bill in committee. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. We are now in committee. That's already our list.
Mm.
Senate is in committee.
Clauses 1 to 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move the clauses 1 to 5 stand parked.
The question is that clause 1 stand apart.
So,
On-
1 to 5. 1 to 5.
One, sorry,
1 to
1
5.
to 5 stand apart. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Honourable Senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 6 to 10.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 6 to 10 stand parked.
The question is that clauses 6 to 10 stand apart. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Honourable Senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 11 to 15.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 11 to 15 stand parked.
The question is that clauses 11 to 15 stand apart. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Honourable Senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
First schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill.
The question is that the first schedule be the first schedule to the bill. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Honourable Senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Second schedule.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill.
The question is that the second schedule be the second schedule to the bill. Honourable members in favour, please say aye. Honourable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
question is that I now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable Senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable Senators against, please say no. He takes the ayes have it.
Chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill currently under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Question is that the Sacramento Cannabis Bill 2019 be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Sacramento Cannabis Act 2019.
Question is that the bill under consideration do now pass and be so cited. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Sorry, you disturbed me a little. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Yes, me think the ayes have it, and the bill has now been passed and will be so cited. Going to do now.
Order number 7, sir. In the name of the Honorable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Company's Amendment Number 2 Bill 2019.
Mr. President, I recognize the time where we are, but this is a very important matter. And initially, I want to beg to move that the following bills be taken as a cognate bill. They're all of similar nature. It has to do in terms of OECD compliance, and I'm therefore asking that items 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, that these 6 bills be taken as one cognate debate.
The question is that the bills indicated, number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, be discussed together as cognate bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. We will now proceed to discuss them together.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think if I may at the outset said I am sure that all honorable members are familiar with these matters, matters of this sort. Indeed, last December, we found ourselves in a position, and it has to do with the international business sector, very important sector in terms of our recovery program, in terms of the requirements, be it from the OECD or the EU. And last December, I believe we were here around the third week of December, dealing with a number of these matters. Again, this year, we are faced with a similar situation. And I should say at the outset that Barbados belongs to the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Tax Information, otherwise called as the Global Forum of the OECD. And the role of this forum is essentially to ensure that all jurisdictions adhere to the same standards of international cooperation in the exchange of tax matters and information on tax matters. This became especially important after 2008, the global financial crisis. when they decided it was necessary to take important measures in terms of various countries and in exchange of information. Barbados has been committed to the Global Forum and has been committed in terms of implementing certain international standards on the exchange of information when requested. We became a member of the Global Forum on Transparency and Exchange of Information for that purposes in 2010, and since then we have been actively participating in the peer review process. We are currently having a phase 2 review being done, and these matters here are so as more or less to bring us into compliance with the requirements as the peer review team is here, and hence there is urgency to getting these matters done. Hence the reason, Mr. President, why I'm delaying you and my colleagues this evening to deal with this matter, because we need to have it done by next week. As I said, all Global Forum members, by virtue of their membership, have agreed to go through peer review from time to time. And as I said, currently the review is looking at Barbados from 2016 to June the 30th, from a period 1st of July 2015 to June the 30th, 2018. So they're reviewing where we should have been in June 2018. They were here in August and identified certain deficiencies and certain weaknesses in terms of regulation in our international business sector. And this applies also in part to some of the matters that we attempted to address last December. The preliminary assessment has revealed, it looks at certain elements, and in some of these categories we are seen as compliant, largely compliant and partially compliant, and obviously those where we are partially compliant we need to address. It speaks in terms of the need for us to look to ensuring that the ownership and identity information is fully available with respect to international and domestic foundations. It said that we need to take measures to ensure that local legal ownership is available in respect of all foreign companies, and also that Barbados should ensure that beneficial ownership information is available in respect of all partnerships. And in other words, they want that when they ask for information of beneficial ownership of companies, that it is readily available. They spoke about in terms of our exchange of information on requests, and that the need for effective enforcement measures to ensure that all entities comply with this requirement. That Barbados needs to implement obligations to maintain beneficial ownership information so that this can be made readily available. They also, I'm going to run through some of it. It's recommended that Barbados ensures that there's adequate oversight of the compliance of international entities with their accounting obligations, and that there should be effective enforcement measures to ensure that all entities comply with record-keeping requirements. They also said that it is recommended that we use compulsory powers in all exchange of information cases to ensure that all the information, appropriate information, is available. In terms, they also went on to highlight the fact that we should systematically provide an update or status report to our partners within the Global Forum within 90 days when the competent authority is unable to provide the response within the time. Coming out of all of this, a number of amendments to various pieces of legislation has become necessary. It is proposed that, hence, in terms of the Foundation Act, it is proposed that this be repealed, and this will automatically remove the recommendations under the first element that I mentioned. In terms of the Corporate Trust Services Provisions Act 2015-2012, there are certain amendments to the first schedule, but these be amended to include external companies, foreign companies, and the list of specified entities. And with this proposed amendment, external companies will not be required to engage a licensed corporate and trust service provider to fulfill certain corporate and trust services. In addition, in terms of the Companies Act 308, the amendment This should be amended to include the following: that the obligation for external companies registered under the Companies Act to engage the service of a duly licensed CTSP would come into place, and an exemption from the filing of annual returns for all entities incorporated under the Companies Act. Mr. President, it is quite technical in terms of the individual amendments. Suffice it to say that there are important requirements at this point in time, and that we have been asked to adhere to these various amendments that are required. And the details are here, but I fear in terms of the time and in terms of going through the details at this time. With these few words, I beg that this bill be now read a second time. 7.
Question is that the bill on the paper, Bill number 7, the company's amendment number 2, Bill 2019, be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Your Honor, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of this bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This one.
And we are now in committee.
Pedro. Starting with 7. What?
Senate is now in committee. That's the EP. That's not EP.
Clause 1?
What is that name? It's not at the right place.
Okay. The company drama.
Yeah. Okay, so I got an amendment to do when we come.
Clause 1?
Chairman, I beg to move that clause 1 stand part.
The question is that clause 1 stand apart. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2?
Chairman, I beg to move that clause 2 stand part.
The question is that clause 2 stand apart. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3?
Chairman, I beg to move that clause 3 stand part.
The question is that clause 3 stand apart. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Honorable senators Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Honourable Senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Mr. Chairman, I want to move an amendment on Clause 4. This is at Clause 4, subparagraph 2A. After it reads, the name and the latest known address of, of each, it's A, right? The name and latest known address of each shareholder. After that, I want to add, and whether the person holds or has held a prominent public office, whether in Barbados or elsewhere. Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 4 as amended, stand apart.
The question is that Clause 4, as amended, stand apart. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Honourable Senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, it's stand part, not stand apart.
Part. He said part.
Stand part rather than stand apart. Stand part. You don't take out the article. Clauses 5 to 15.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clauses 5 to 15 stand part.
The question is that Clauses 5 to 15 stand apart. Honourable.
Stand part.
Stand
Part. P-A-R-T.
apart.
Part. Not apart. Part. Together.
Apart. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Honourable Senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honourable Senators in favour, please say aye. Honourable Senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passes of the bill currently under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the company's amendment number 2 bill 2019.
The question is that the bill under consideration do now pass and be so cited.
As amended, sorry.
The bill as amended do now pass and be so cited. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. The bill has now been passed. It will become the Act 7.
Yeah.
The Foundation Repeal Bill Act. Sorry. Companies Amendment Number 2 Act 2019. Next.
I need this. Is that it? I know, but is that it? Isn't it?
Order number 6, sir. In the name of the Honourable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the company's Economic Substance Bill 2019.
Mr. President, I beg that this bill be now read a second time.
The question is that the bill currently under consideration, the company's Economic Substance Bill 2019, be now read a second time. All honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that your honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration. of
Question
this bill.
is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for further consideration of this bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and we are now in committee.
Okay, you ready?
Economic substance. Senate is now in committee.
Clauses 1 to 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 1 to 5 stand part.
The question is that clause 1 stand part.
1 to 5. 1 to 5. 1 to 5.
1 to 5 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Thinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 6 to 11.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 6 to 11 stand part.
The question is that clauses 6 to 11 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 12 to 19.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 12 to 19 stand part.
The question is that clauses 12 to 19 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye. Aye. Honorable senators against, please say no. Takes the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill currently under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Question is that the bill currently under consideration be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Companies Economic Substance Act 2019.
Question is that the measure under consideration do now pass and be so cited. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. You have a list of those acts because they can't find them by file. You can't.
Soon finish, all right? Just 3 more after this. This is the third. The 6 and all. Ready? Ready? Let me. Order number. Order number 8, sir. In the name of the Honorable Acting Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Corporate and Trust Service Providers Amendment Number 2 Bill 2019.
Mr. President, I beg to move the Corporate and Trust Service Providers Amendment Number 2 Bill 2019 be read a second time.
Question is that the bill currently under consideration be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that you now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee
Question
for
is
further
that I-
consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of the bill under consideration in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and we are now in committee.
The Senate is in committee.
You get excited.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 1 to 4 stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 to 4 stand part. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you now report to His Honor, the President, the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor, the President, the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable senators in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Honorable senators against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Bill be read a third time.
I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, because they still need it to read
The
to.
chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill currently under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The bill is now being read a third time.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill now pass and be cited as the Corporate and Trust Service Providers Amendment Number 2 Act 2019.
Question is that the bill under consideration do now pass and be so cited. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the bill has now been passed and will be cited as the Corporate and Trust Service Providers Amendment Act Number 2, 2019.
Order number 9, sir. In the name of the Honorable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Foundations Repeal Bill 2019.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
Question is that the bill currently under consideration be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that your honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of the bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We are now, I think the ayes have it, and we are now in committee.
It is, this one is the foundations. Foundations,
Found it.
yeah. And then the limited partnership.
But number 7.
Number 9, but 7. 7.
Senate is in committee.
Clauses 1 and 2.
Chairman, I beg to move the clauses 1 and 2 stand par.
The question is that clauses 1 and 2 stand part. Honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill currently under consideration in committee.
President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methink the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Foundations Repeal Act 2019.
Question is that the bill under consideration do now pass and be so cited. All honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and the bill has now been passed.
Order number 10, sir. In the name of the Honorable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Limited Partnerships Amendment Bill 2019.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
The question is that the bill currently under consideration, the Limited Partnership Amendment Bill 2019, be now read a second time. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that I do now leave the chair, and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of this bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and we are now in committee.
This is found at number 11.
Senate is in committee.
Clauses 1 and 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 1 and 2 stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 and 2 stand part. Honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Honorable members against, please say no.
Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill currently under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Limited Partnership Amendment Act 2019.
The question is that the bill under consideration do now pass and be cited as the Limited Partnership Amendment Act 2019. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Order number 11, sir. In the name of the Honorable Leader of the Senate, to move the second reading of the Societies with Restricted Liability Amendment Bill 2019.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a second time.
The question is that the bill currently under consideration be now read a second time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that Your Honor do not leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that I do now leave the chair and the Senate resolve itself into a committee of the whole Senate for the further consideration of the bill under consideration in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and we are now in committee.
That's the last one. That's the last.
Senators in committee.
Clauses 1 to 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 1 to 5 stand part.
The question is that clauses 1 to 5 stand part. Honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do not report to His Honor the President the passing of one bill in committee. Honorable members in favor, please say aye. Honorable members against, please say no. He thinks the ayes have it. That's the last one.
Yes, the last text.
The chairman has reported to me the passage of the bill currently under consideration in committee.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
The question is that the bill under consideration be now read a third time. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. President, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Societies with Restricted Liability Amendment Act 2019.
Question is that the bill under consideration do not pass and be so cited. That is, the Society with Restricted Liability Amendment Act 2019. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it, and the bill has now been passed.
Mr. President, this brings us to the end of our work for today. We've been here for about 12 hours now, Mr. President, and I want to really commend you and all of my honorable colleagues for enduring until the end and ensuring that the government's and the people's business has been done. And in this regard, we'd also like to thank the clerks of Parliament and also the other staff of Parliament. And I beg to move that the Senate be adjourned until Wednesday, the 4th of November. December. Next Wednesday, the 4th.
I too agree with the honorable leader of the Senate that we've had a long and productive day. And I want to thank all concerned, all of you fellow senators, the clerk, the table, our support staff for assisting us in this mammoth feat. The question is that the bill, that the House be now, the Senate be now adjourned until next Wednesday, the 4th of December. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. And we now stand adjourned until next week, the 4th of December, 2019.